Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I'm a cloud solutions architect focused on management technologies. Today's discussion will be part one in a series that's focusing on the various components of the Intune Suite. So you see today's session will be on remote help. Subsequent sessions will cover each of the other components, some in more detail than others. And so let's get started with remote help. So remote help, well, here's the agenda, right? Typical agenda for sessions like this that I do. So we'll just jump right into it. So what is remote help? Well, it's not too far of a leap to realize that remote help is a remote control solution. And there are a bunch of remote control solutions. So this is really not any different in concept from other remote control solutions, but it does have its uniquenesses, capabilities, right? Ability to chat during a remote control session, ability to resize the screen, or use a laser pointer. And again, fairly maybe common features for remote control solutions, and it's just implemented a bit differently. And I'll show you how that works. So in a remote help environment, right? There is one requirement. You'll see it again on the slide in a minute. And well, there's more than one requirement, but there's one key requirement. That is that the users on both ends of the remote control session, the remote help session, be users that are in Entra ID, right? Beyond that, it's up to you whether you want to limit remote help to only devices that are enrolled or expand it also to unenrolled devices, completely and totally up to you. As you'll see in a minute, the platforms that we support, typically, maybe you think of Windows. It's not limited to Windows. In this session, you'll see remote help being used on Windows. And you'll also see remote help being used on macOS, right? So we also support Android. I'll talk about Android here at the end and why I'm not including it in the demo. And it is a remote control. Remote help is delivered completely from the cloud. So as long as your systems have an internet connection and your users are in Entra ID largely, you'll be able to do a remote help session with them, right? And of course, there are a few networking things, not huge ones, that you have to cover, but most environments should be fine with that, right? So why do we care about remote help? Remote help is driven from the cloud. It is implemented in a very robustly secure fashion. Also, you have the controls over the kind of experience you allow for remote help through role-based access controls. I'll show that to you. Right? It could be that you want certain users to only be able to view, where you want other users to be able to take full control, and yet maybe other users you want full control and the ability to do admin tasks and so forth, right? So you'll see the controls where you can set who actually gets what rights. All right. So moving into focusing on Windows, what are the requirements for Windows? Well, I already mentioned that you need Entra ID. Also, each device that's going to be participating in remote help needs to have the remote help app on it. Now, as soon as I say that, let me put a bit of an asterisk on that, and I'll explain the asterisk as we get further in the session, right? But in our documentation, remote help app is needed. You need Windows 10 or 11 supported version, and there are certain networking considerations that you'll see in just a second. Need to make sure we adhere to that. Nothing huge and strange, right? And this is part of the Intune Suite, so you definitely need appropriate licensing, either the full Intune Suite or components thereof, so that you have rights to use remote help. In terms of capabilities, Windows has the most vast array of capabilities. Again, you can extend remote help to enrolled or unenrolled devices, right? Or just keep it with enrolled, up to you. The remote help session, you can leverage conditional access for devices that are participating in remote help. If devices aren't compliant, the ones that you're reaching out to, then we'll let you know that, and you have an option whether you proceed or not. Elevation of privilege is something you can absolutely do. You can do chat without any concern if you allow that. And then this last one, remotely start session. This is that unattended kind of thing where you don't have a user on the other end and you need to start the remote help session. All right, so I'll show you that in a graph here in a minute. So here's the first one, how it works, right? Overview, interactive. So how does this look? We have our cloud here, Entra ID. The user accounts are in Entra ID. And then as a part of Azure, we have the remote assistance service. There is this specific URL that you need to allow access to. We need port 443, TLS 1.2, and on a Windows device, the remote help session goes over the remote desktop protocol. So we definitely need those things, right? Then to introduce some terms, we have the helper, who typically would be IT, that would be helping a sharer, a typical user maybe, with a problem that they're trying to solve, right? The way this works in an interactive kind of scenario is the helper is going to use the remote help app to request a security code. And then they're going to provide that over to the sharer. The sharer will take the code, implement it in the remote help app, and then there's a bit of negotiation between the two machines, which you'll see. The helper ultimately decides if they want to request a view only or a full control type session, and then everything is up to the sharer to decide if they want to allow that, right? So that's the interactive mode for remote help. There's also the unattended mode where the user does not have to be present, right? Same kind of requirements and protocols and so forth, except here there's no user. So we're going to not initiate the remote help session directly from the app. We're going to go into the Intune portal and initiate it there. I'll show you where that happens. And then on the remote computer, Intune kind of sends all the notifications and codes behind the scenes to go ahead and launch the remote help app, and off we go, right? So may have problems with the demo on that. We'll see. Kind of in a weird networking situation right now. Earlier today when I tried it, it worked, but several times before it didn't. So you'll at least get the idea of what you're doing. Hopefully we'll be able to see it work end to end. All right. So that said, we move into the idea of configuring remote help. So let's pop into the Intune portal for that, right? Also, one of the things you're going to want to do on your Windows devices, again, is deploy the remote help app. Now, you could, like I do in my lab, just install it manually. Certainly that doesn't scale. For testing, it might be okay. But we do have the remote help app available. So aka.ms/download remote help, I believe is the URL. Let's see if that works. There we go. So we're downloading the installer right there, right? So I'm going to cancel that because I don't need it. But you see, that's what we do. And so you can take that installer. It's just an exe, right? And go ahead and do that, right? Now, also, you likely will want to deploy this to your environment. So the way it works is that you're going to create a Win32 app to actually get the remote help app deployed. So let me show you that. All right, go into Windows Apps and Remote. There's Remote Help. So I have the Win32 app configured. We fully document what you need to do whenever you configure this. It's really not a big deal. I'll look at the properties of it and we'll be able to see just a few items. You know, here's the Remote Help app. There's also our install command lines. You can decide whether you want to enable auto updating or not. Here's our uninstall command lines. Some detail. You can specify requirements for your environment as much as you need to. Detection rules, we give you guidance on that, right? And that's really it for deploying the Win32 version of the Remote Help app. Now, the Remote Help app comes as an executable. And so you will need to, as is common with Win32 app deployment, repackage that into the Intune Win format. And then from there, you can deploy it, right? Okay, so that is getting the Remote Help app onto your computers. But even if you do that, remote help is not yet necessarily enabled. So how do you go enable remote help? Well, to do that, we will go into tenant administration, and then here we will see remote help. And here we have just a few options, right? The settings we'll get to in a minute are right here. We have the monitor node. And so my lab is boring. I just have a couple of machines, right? I did a couple of sessions. You can see how long the sessions lasted and how many sessions I've done. Also, you can get a good readout of how many sessions are ongoing. So you can see mine and what I've been doing back and forth in my lab. And that's cool, right? So you can keep track of the usage and who's using it and which machines and so forth. There's also, under settings, the ability to configure. So the first thing is, yeah, you need it enabled. You can do all of that through configure. And here's where you can decide whether you enable it or not. Also, whether you want to allow remote help to unenrolled devices and whether or not you want to disable chat. In my case, I've left everything on. So we should be good to go. And that's it, really. It's that simple to enable once you have the licensing in place. No problem. And so I have it enabled now. And so let's actually go see this thing work. So to do that, I'm going to pull up a virtual machine here. Let's see, this one right here. So this is my admin machine. So this is my user account right here. It's going to be my admin machine. And I will initiate my remote help session from there. Oops, the session went away. Apologies. Let me go grab it again. Well, anyway, I will grab it in a minute. Here's my, there it is. So let me go grab the other one. This is the machine that I am going to remote control or initiate remote help to. Let me move it over to the main screen. There it is. And so you'll see a different, oops, let me move it out again. You'll see a different user account here, right? Come on. STD user versus Steve Rack, right? So this is where I'm going to do remote help. And so I'm going to try to put these kind of side by side so you can see them. Let me maximize. Come on, come on, come on. Let me get this resized appropriately. Well, when I squashed my screen down, apparently it closed that. So let me fix that. Okay, much better. That's what I wanted. So you see the full screen. I'm going to try to carefully pull this aside and put it up here so that you can see it side by side as I'm initiating the remote help session. I did the same thing. Okay, well, I'll just do it this way, right? So I'm going to, this is my IT machine in the demo here. I'm going to go ahead and get a security code. And so that's going to go up to Azure and get a security code. So I'm just going to copy and paste it. It's convenient to do so since my machines are both here. And then I'm going to go to my other machine and try to paste that. Let me see if I can get back on the screen here. There we go. All right, so I'm going to enter the code. There we go, and submit. Right, and so we'll see a little bit of chatter. I don't like that I can't resize this window. So waiting for the person. So I should see notification here in just a minute. Connecting. All right, so I'm going to just ask to view the screen. Let me get my other machine back up beside me. So should get a notification over here in just a second. Okay, so now it's asking me to approve. So I'm going to allow. So you see the user has ultimate authority over what they want to allow or not. All right, and so now the remote control session has started. I can move this out of the way, and I have remote control of the machine, right? You see the user mode that I'm in as administrator. If you need to elevate your permissions, you can do so. Here are some of the different controls, like this one I think is, whichever monitor you want to look at. Here's a laser pointer. Here's, I think, annotation. I can't remember what all these icons are. Let's see if it will highlight for me. Here's resizing the screen. I can initiate chat if I want to here. right? Howdy, bam. Whatever I want to do. I can remotely restart the machine if I want to. Whatever I need to get done, I can get done, right? So these will all light up here again in just a minute. I actually left the session, didn't mean to do that, but you get the idea, right? Pretty standard stuff, pretty easy to use, pretty seamless back and forth. Okay, so I'm going to close this. And I'm also going to go to my other machine and close it as well. Let me pull that up and close remote help. And I'm going to try this. I don't know if it's going to work. It's going to be kind of a roll of the dice, so to speak. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in to my Intune portal from my test machine. Where I was just showing you the Intune portal was from my Microsoft machine, and they are not using the same tenant, so I need to make sure I'm using the tenant that my machines report to, right? We'll see. So here, let me just log in. Okay, and I'm probably going to have to do some multi-factor here in just a second. Give me a minute and I will get that done. All right, so good enough. All right, so I'm going to be logged in here. And what I want to do, this is going to be the unattended, attempt anyway, at the unattended remote control or remote help scenario. So I'm going to go into Devices. And then under Devices, I'm going to choose the device that I want to do remote help to. So under Windows, I'm going to go in and choose this machine that I'm on. I believe it's this one. Let's see. Yeah, that's it. Okay. And then you're going to see some actions up here. And so in my actions, you're going to see Start a Remote Assist Session. Well, this is not Remote Assist, it's Remote Help, but it's the same button, and you're going to see Remote Help pop up here as an option. Okay, good. So Remote Help. Now I'm going to continue. What Intune is going to do is send a notification to the user's device, so the other one that I was doing Remote Help to, and then I should be able to launch the Remote Help app. This may or may not work, depending on networking. It did. Okay, cool. So let's go and see the other machine. So here's the other machine. I don't have Remote Help running on it now. Let's launch the Remote Help app and open it, right? So there's Remote Help on this machine. This is my IT machine. And then here is my other machine. And let's see what we can do. Give it a minute here to do its thing. Hopefully it will work. We'll see. Still trying. I'm kind of getting skeptical. Let's see. I'm going to pause the video and see if it actually comes. Okay, I'm still stuck here and it's just trying to spin. You get the idea though. And Remote Help should just initiate right on the machine without any issue at all. I'm going to go ahead and close out of these, close out of my console as well, and close out of Remote Help, and just chalk this up to network didn't want to work for me today. Not a huge surprise, but you get the idea. Right, I realize also one thing I did not do that I want to show you is I showed you how to configure Remote Help, no big deal. But what I did not show you is the role-based controls. So let's go under Roles. And to show you that, I'll just go ahead and create a new role. Okay, give it a fancy name and click Next. And then the Remote Help options are under the Remote Help app. And there's 4 of them. Right? Now you see I don't have any of them. Well, I get those permissions because I'm full Intune administrator on my machine, but this is where you can decide who gets what, right? All right, then there's another one under remote assistance. I think it's remote assistance here. Let's see. Nope, that's not it. Remote tasks, perhaps. There we go. Send, let's see. There's a remote assistance one in here somewhere. Offer remote assistance. There you go. All right, there's another one that you can control. Okay, so that's setting up remote help, and it's also using remote help on a Windows device. Now, let's change the page. Let's talk about, and we just did this. Let's talk about Mac, right? So remote help on a Mac is very similar to what you just saw, but it's also different, right? So same kind of requirements, but with a Mac, you have a little bit of a different experience. So you have two ways to do remote help on a Mac. One is to use the native app, and you can deploy that to your machines that you want to do remote help on, where you want to provide remote help. Now, what's different is that the helper, IT typically, never uses the native app on a Mac, right? They always will use the browser, right? And you may or may not want to use the native app on the sharer's computer. It totally depends on whether you want to take remote control or not, right? If you want to take remote control, full remote control, not just screen viewing, then you do need that app on the machine, right? You also need some security permissions, which I will show you those configured. You need a supported browser to be able to do it. You need single sign-on out there. These are the supported OSs where you can do that, right? And then, of course, appropriate licensing. Now, the capabilities here are still good, but not as many as in Windows. You can do enrolled or unenrolled. We'll have compliance warning. You can't do unattended, so a user needs to be there, chat, and conditional access, right? So here's a graphic of what it looks like different for a Mac. So here you see the IT person using a Windows device. That's what I'm going to do. But the sharer has a Mac. Works fine, right? So the helper will use their web browser, right? And the sharer may have the app, or they may use the browser too, if all they want to do is share their screen, right? Totally up to you. This is the URL that the helper will go to initiate the remote help session. Here's where the sharer will go to go ahead and join that remote help session, right? The rest of it, pretty darn similar, right? So let's actually go look at that, right? So I have a Mac. You're not going to be able to see my Mac right now. I'm going to pop up my Intune portal again because I'm going to go over here and aka.ms/RHH, I believe. That's the one I need to go to as the helper. Let me just check that real quick just to make sure I didn't do anything. RHH, yes, as the helper, good. Okay, so I'm in my web browser and I'm going to get authenticated. It's going to ask me what account. Here I go. So my Mac is sitting over here with the web page also open. And so I'm going to have to copy over the security code manually. So 407. 407. And then JYM. JYM. And then 69. 69. So I will say OK on my Mac. And so we hopefully will see something change if I type that right in a minute on my current screen where I'm the IT person trying to get a remote session. Here we go. So it's connecting. The Mac actually gives the users a couple of more places where you can say yes or no. So I'm going to ask for screen sharing. I only have that option because on the Mac I'm using a browser, not the native app. I'm kind of doing things out of order with my demo. I'll show you a couple of configurations that need to be in place for the app if you want to deploy it, and some other security settings here in just a moment. So sorry, I'm switching that up. Okay, the Mac is now asking me, do I want to allow myself to remotely help myself on my own Mac? So I'm going to say, okay, right? So it's not enrolled in Intune, so do I want to continue? Yes, I do. Mac is asking me again, do I want to let the OS use my microphone? I don't care. I'll go ahead and say allow. It doesn't really matter. And so I'm going to allow, and then we should have, here's one more share your screen confirmation on the Mac, and then we should have it popping up right here. So there it is. It should expand a little bit here in just a minute. Right? And I'm just watching the screen. I think it should expand. It did a minute ago, so hopefully it will. There it did, expanded a bit. Right? So you can do whatever. You see that I'm moving my mouse on my Mac, and so there you go, right? It's done. Simple as that, right? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that and leave. Now, I want to show you a couple of configurations that you need for your Mac if you are going to deploy the native app, right? So let's start with apps and let's go macOS. There's two ways that you can deploy the app. You can deploy it as a PKG, or you can deploy it as a DMG. The decision really is up to whether you want to have the user choose to install it or whether you want to enforce it on the device. Here is remote help that I configured for my Mac. I didn't install it, but here it is, right? I can see the properties and so forth. There it is, right? So off we go, right? No big deal. There it is. So that's the app, and I can deploy it, make it required, and off we go. But in order for remote help to work on a Mac, you are going to need to allow a couple of different security settings. And we document fully how to do that. So let's go over to macOS, and we'll look at, configuration, right? And you might have noticed on the screen, this Mac is not enrolled. I haven't had it enrolled for a bit. And for this demo, I just didn't enroll it. But I do have these permissions here. So here is my compliance policy or configuration profile to enable the security needed on the Mac. And again, we fully document this, but and you don't have to do it here. You can let the users do it if you want to, no problem. But it's easier to deploy it in bulk. And again, I haven't deployed it because my Mac is not currently enrolled, but you'll see how it's supposed to be configured. Let's go down here to configuration settings, edit. And then these are the various settings that you need to allow, right? So let's edit the instance here. This is for accessibility, right? Allow authorization. Here's the code snippet. You get this from our documentation. Here's the identifier, also from our documentation. Identifier type bundle ID, and static code is false, right? And then there's one more for screen capture. We'll edit the instance, and you will see here it's allow standard user to set system service. Here's also the code snippet and so forth. So easy enough to configure. Put that down ahead of time. It gives the permissions that you need if you want to do full control and some different things. You saw that it worked fine just sharing the screen in view-only mode. But if you want to do full control and such, you need these permissions and such, right? Okay, good enough. So that is Mac and the demo of remote help. Then we turn to Android. And I'm not demonstrating Android. It works very similar to what you just saw, right? The reason I'm not demonstrating Android, I was going to, but we only support two device types, Zebra, and I don't have one. I don't have a Zebra device, and Samsung Knox, right? I do have a Samsung Knox device, but when I went to pull it out to get it ready for the demo, it wouldn't power on. So I think I no longer have a Samsung Knox device, and I have to find another one somewhere. But pretty much works the same way. You do need to, when you deploy the app, it's going to be in the managed Google Play Store, so you deploy it from there, right? And that's about all I'm going to say about Android, because I just don't have one to do. Here's the capabilities. You can do unattended control and full control, no problem, right? And that's all I have. I didn't even do the graph of how it works because I can't demonstrate it, and I'm just going to move on from there. Okay. And folks, that's really it in terms of showing you remote help. But there are a few things that I want to share with you. On a Windows device, right? If you want to troubleshoot different things, we allow you, for example, if you're having trouble installing remote help for some reason, we have logs out here, and you can kind of see the install, uninstall logs. We also have a dedicated event log for remote help, and we have fully documented the firewall rules. Now, I didn't have to change any firewall rules on my Windows device to cause this to work, but we do show you what you need. And then tips and tricks. Remember that beginning comment when I was showing you Windows and said you need the remote help app on your Windows devices. Well, that's what we document as required. But whenever I use the web app against the web controls against my Mac, I saw in the documentation a mention that you could, and it was either a direct mention or it was an inference that you could use it on Windows too. So I did try, and it worked just fine, right? No problem at all. It even gave me recognized I was on a multi-monitor system and asked me which screen to share or to look at or whatever it was, right? So it does work. Take a look at it if that would benefit you in a Windows-only environment. I didn't test it to see if there's really any limitations. I just tested it to make sure it works, and it does, right? So that's the asterisk, that I mentioned. For macOS, right? Not really any troubleshooting here that I'm going to go over, but there just are a few tips. I'll let you read these, right? We did say that SSO must be enabled to use the remote help web app. So you do need that enabled to make that work, right? And then Android, just one mention here about Android. Again, can't show you Android right now because I don't have one that works, at least not one that's compatible with remote help that works. And then this last slide might be interesting. Linux. So I didn't mention Linux as a supported operating system because it's not. But we do have a blurb in our documentation that says, and this is the only place I've ever seen something like this in our documentation, which is interesting, that even though it's not supported on Linux to do remote help, that if you use a supported browser, it likely will work just fine. So if you do have Linux machines where you want to test that out and it will benefit you, then maybe it will pay off for you and you'll be able to work with that too. No promises. Again, it's not supported. And what we say at Microsoft usually is that if we don't support something, we don't document it, right? We don't document what we don't support. In this one article, in this one case, I did find a blurb that says, we don't support it, but here, try it. So that was interesting and unique, but it might be helpful to you. So there it is. And so that's it. We're going to wrap it up here. More sessions coming in the Intune Suite series. So have a good day. We'll see you next time.